people would come over to him and they'd be wide-eyed and tripping balls at a Dead show, and they'd be like, "What are you selling, dude?" And he would say, "I'm selling 3-sided electric T-shirts," and they're like, "What?" And he would like turn the T-shirt one way and say side 1, turn it back the other way and say side 2, and then turn it back the other way again and say side 3, and they would look at him and be like, "But what's electric about it?" And he was like, "You're what's electric about it."
Der Joldes mir me kone, der Joldes mir me kone, der Joldes mir me kone, auf ma stikele broit, auf ma schwarzstickel broit. Alle meine Juren bin ich gonvenen gefuhren, in gonvenen es bitter wieder teut. Oi, alle meine Juren bin ich joineven gefuhren, in joineven es bitter wieder teut. Der Schäfer kommt mir wecken, der Schäfer kommt mir wecken, der Schäfer kommt mir wecken.
Welcome to Extra Sauce. My name is Chaim Cohn. It's been a bit of a break. It was been Yom Tovim and whatnot, and but we're back. And I was traveling a bit. I was in Poland and Uman for Rosh Hashanah, then Sukkot, the whole thing. And plan to bring you a couple interesting things that I have in the pipeline, some about my travels and other great conversations that I've been having, and hopefully plan to get back on track to bring one a week, if not every other week. So it's late Monday night, and I'm here recording. And yesterday I was at Shmaya Honickman, a good friend of mine, Shmaya's wedding to Yocheved, and it was a really beautiful wedding. And I felt it was a good time for me to get my act together and edit and post a podcast that I did with Shmaya probably 2 months ago, when I was just kind of getting my feet wet with this, and Shmaya and I worked together, and I asked him if he would do one with me, asking him some questions about his interests, namely comic books and superheroes and Grateful Dead. 2 things that I know little about and are passions of his. And it ended up being about a 2.5-hour conversation over some cigars and Bali Shag. He smokes the Bali Shag. And espressos. And it went in a bunch of interesting directions, and I edited it down to about 1 hour. But it was a rich conversation, and it started out, I was in a pretty crappy mood, and I was talking about being judgy and making assumptions and being jealous and resentful. And I was talking to him about this movie that I had watched the night before called Room, really wacky movie based on a true story about this little kid who grows up inside of a room because his mother was kidnapped with him, and he grows up in this little room with her. I don't know, it's a weird movie. It's on Netflix. But I was telling him how, like, when I'm in this space of, woe is me and being down on myself, how everyone and everything just reminds me of what I lack, and how I was jealous of this 5-year-old kid in this little room because whatever, I don't know. His mother was giving him a lot of attention because he was the only person there, and he gets to learn math, and then he goes out, and because they get out and showered with all this attention and whatever. But that was the irony, right? So and that's pretty much me, when I'm being a little bitch. But yeah, so we were talking a bit about that, and we got into this theme about confusing our lack for what the issue is, and we forget our innate power and how that really lies within the thing we're avoiding the most, which is ourselves. Anyway, and I got to talk to him about Grateful Dead and about superheroes and the hero's journey. And coming from Shmaya's wedding yesterday, I can truly say that he exemplifies that message, and kind of contrasting the stuff we talked about and some of his beginnings and journey, and just the beautiful wedding that I was at yesterday. And yeah, it reminded me of something that I heard once, in this work that I do and Shmaya does. I heard someone say, we don't really change. People don't usually change, but we can transform. And that is kind of the story of the hero's journey. And Shmaya is certainly an example of that. So this is the conversation that we had. I hope you enjoy it. And another thing that I was thinking about in relation to the hero's journey and superheroes, and the Joker movie just came out. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen many, Batman or any superhero movies, as you'll hear. But I do understand enough to know that this is the first movie that the main character is the bad guy. And I just Googled just now to find out, how it ends. And if I'm not mistaken, there isn't like a resolution in terms of a taking down of the bad guy. It kind of is more like a story that would make the viewer empathize or sympathize with the Joker. And that's like a trend, in Hollywood that's been going on for a long time. In the 50s, it was pretty straightforward. There's a good guy and the bad guy, and the good guy has to win. And we kind of got smarter and started making it more nuanced. And now the most popular thing is, nothing is quite as it seems. And I'm like anyone else. I mean, I enjoy the true crime stuff and like going into the mind of a serial killer and all that kind of stuff. And Sopranos is one of my favorite shows that I've watched, I don't know, dozens of times. And that's all the whole thing's about, a mobster in therapy. And but I enjoy it, but at the same time, there's an awareness that, there's good and there's bad. And I feel like sometimes we get confused between good and boring, and then like bad and courageous, But the truth is, like, there's nothing boring about being good if we're talking about, mastering one's own story, transforming. Because just to say good is meaningless, but talking about good that comes with a story, it's never quite as simple. Whereas, it doesn't take much courage to just be bad. It does take courage to come from an excuse to be bad and then utilize that towards good. And anyway, I think that's something that's missing, but that's for another time. So, yeah, I don't think we want to be boring, and I think we want the dangerous. But if we're talking about real good, you could be good and very dangerous. Just coming back from Poland and, consuming a whole lot more Holocaust stuff than usual, which is already a lot. And I was thinking, like, the people who stuck their neck out and risked their own lives to save Jews, like, they weren't good in terms of, like, they were bad, meaning they were doing the bad thing. The quote-unquote good ones were the people following orders and reporting. And, but to be bad was to be dangerous and to, like, defy, the rules of nature and do the right thing. So, anyway, that's enough about that. So I hope you enjoy this, and look forward to bringing some more stuff soon. And I want to wish my good friend Shmaya and Yocheved hearty Mazel Tov, and they're both beautiful people, and I can't wait to continue celebrating with them. And I hope Better late than never, but I hope the timing worked out and that you enjoy this. Mazel tov Shmaya and Yocheved. Talk to you soon.
Really, what I wanted to get to with you is to learn a few things that I know little to nothing about, pretty much nothing, and that I, some more than others, just have like a sense of judgment, or I undermine or minimize because I don't know about that, so it must be stupid. So I do that with people, I do that with things, I do that with like interests. And like, if I'm being really honest, like I'd like to stop doing that. Certainly as much as I do. A little, I've been making some headway. But let's like give that a try, shall we?
Let's.
So there's a few things that I know about you. Maybe we'll get to learn more. But you are a deadhead, right?
That's correct.
That's not a derogatory thing when people say that, right?
I don't think so.
Is it ever you? No.
Not
No.
that I can know.
Okay.
No.
So, all right. And well, let's start there. Let's start with that. When did that start? How did it start for you? What's it all about? And like, just not too long, because I know that's probably a loaded thing, but like as if you're talking to a 5-year-old, because, well, in this case, you really are. And there's always a part of me that's 5.
Right. So I am a deadhead, the son of a deadhead. So when did it start? To answer that in the easiest way possible was it never wasn't. I was on some level destined to this because of my father. And even, my father, when he used to put us to bed at night, when he was around, because in my very early years, he wasn't around so much. He was working a lot, and he only came home for Shabbos for like the first 2 years of my life. And so when he was around, he used to sing to us songs before we went to bed. And one of the songs he would sing us was a Dead song, right? So from my earliest founding memories of that sweet good night of being able to go to sleep, what with my tormented brain, which always existed, was like this sweet melody that my father would sing that made me feel safe and comforted. And as I got older, my father we used to wear Grateful Dead clothing. Like there's pictures of me 3, 4, 5 years old in Dead shirts, and payas and tzitzis under them. Like that's just what I wore, And so I was oriented towards it. But that's not really the important thing, although it's important because it was always there. But what's mostly important is that I chose it for myself also. When I was in high school, I was extremely depressed. My elementary school years were very painful for me. My existence was very painful. And by the time I got to high school, I was certain that I would commit suicide before I was 21. I couldn't fathom staying alive from the age of like 12 to 21. Like that seemed too painful. And I didn't even really hit puberty yet. So it wasn't even the hormones that a teenager goes through. Just existence by itself was tremendously painful. And I was listening to a lot of heavy metal at one point, and I stumbled upon a Dead song. It's called Saint Stephen. And something about it just spoke to me. It's on the album Oxam Oxoa. And it opened me up. It was the first time in my life I was able to feel like myself safely. And I don't think I knew that at the time. or at least I didn't understand it conceptually, but I felt it deeply. And as I continued to mature into young adulthood, and I started experimenting with drugs and alcohol and all sorts of different things, I remember feeling not so grounded in my life. And my father pulled me aside one day and he said, "You're going to need an anchor. Life is going to throw you all sorts of turbulence, and you're going to need an anchor." And I remember choosing Jerry Garcia as my anchor. Jerry Garcia is going to be the person, Jerry Garcia is the lead guitar player and the founder of the Grateful Dead, and that he had this unique ability to bring me back home. Like, no matter what was going on, he can bring me back home. And what's interesting, there was a 6-hour documentary that was released on Amazon about the Grateful Dead. Jerry Garcia was called the bearer of bad news. A lot of the songs, a lot of Dead songs, are sad on some level, which if externally you look at Deadheads or you look at people that are going to Dead shows or whatever, you see people in bright colors, smiling, having the time of your life, and you just assume that they're these hippy-dippy people who don't understand how existentially crushing life could be, right? But then, like, you listen to some of the songs, and, like, a lot of them are really sad. People aren't being able to end up with the love of their life. They're killed before the story progresses, like in the song Peggio. Not in Peggio, but in whatever. I'm blanking on the song, but whatever. Her husband dies early in the song, and like whatever. There's a song called "Death Don't Have No Mercy," which is like, death is gonna come for you. Doesn't matter. Death steals your mother, your sisters, your siblings. Like, it's coming for you. And like, there's a song called "Morning Dew," which is like, the young people aren't laughing and playing anymore. I think I hear some young guy mourning. I hear a baby crying. Like, a lot of sad things.
Well, the name of the band to begin with isn't exactly so reflective of their colors. What's that about?
Well, I'll get to that in one quick second. But what's interesting is that the way that they play these songs, or the way that the music accompanies these sad things, is from a place of like safety to experience those feelings. So I found this place musically where I was able to experience the vast emotions of human existence safely between the notes of any given song. And their catalog is massive, with hundreds of songs. And I've never experienced a feeling that Jerry didn't let me experience safely in my life. Joy, grief, mourning, shame, anger, happiness, gratitude. All of them, right? I'm able to safely experience those through the context of that music. You just asked a second ago, where did they get the name from? Which is, not to get into the story of it, because the story is just whatever, but what the name means, it comes from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And for most of your listeners are Jewish, so I could use it in this context. A Grateful Dead is a terminology that's used for a person who dies on the side of the road that no one buries, and someone decides to bury them, which we have a terminology for called a mace mitzvah. Mm-hmm. So the term Grateful Dead literally means a mace mitzvah. And in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they say that that dead person, his spirit will guide you and help you find your fortune along the way. And we in our tradition say that a mace mitzvah, when you bury a mace mitzvah, it gives you richas yamim, right? Mm-hmm. You say something like that, that it gives you a long life. And long life, we know, doesn't necessarily mean you'll live for a long time, but that your life will be well lived. And that's reflective in the music, right? Like, I could experience this sadness in a place of joy or in a place of safety, right? It allows me to live my life well lived. And that's not even me talking about the community of Deadheads, which is a beautiful community that I get from going to see the shows. And that's not even talking about the magic that enters my life when I'm at a show, because that's a whole other thing, right? Like going to a show is like, it's similar like going to the Rebbe, I guess, on some level. You know, like when the Rebbe was alive, you would go to him and you would feel this surge of like koach to go out and live your life. I've heard many people say things like that, or live their best life, or really own themselves. And when I leave a show, I could be physically tired from dancing for 5 hours, 4 hours, but I've never been more energized to accomplish my own personal missionhood.
I'm wondering maybe, because I asked you to choose a piece to share, like a sample of what you connect with. So maybe I'll just play that and then you could tell us about it. And then I'll ask some questions.
We could do that.
So what's this from?
The sample that you're going to play is a 20-second clip, 10-second clip, something like that, from a song called Terrapin Station Medley, Terrapin Station Medley, which is a 16-minute song on the album Terrapin Station.
Storyteller makes no choice. Soon you will not hear his voice. His job is to shed light and not to master.
So you want to tell us about that, why you chose that?
Well, you asked me, is there like a specific song or something? And in advance, you asked me, is there a specific song that, whatever. And anytime I think about, that's not even my favorite Grateful Dead song. But when I think of something that sums up for me what the Grateful Dead mean, I often think about that song, Terrapin Station, which is on some level the hero's journey. It's the story of seemingly a man finding himself a woman, or a woman challenging two men, and one guy gets her, and the journey of coming home, right? Terrapin is a type of a turtle, and at a later point in the song, it says some rise, some fall, some climb to get to Terrapin, and the mila of a turtle is that its home is always on its back, and the journey of constantly recognizing that I already have what I need. And that story really represents that. On a deeper level, the story is about the storyteller. It's not so much about the people in the story. Like that clip that we played, you could play it again.
Yeah.
Storyteller makes no choice. Soon you will not hear his voice. His job is to shed light and not to master.
His job is to shed light, but not to master, right? He's telling this story. He's watching these events unfold and then sharing the story. And in a lot of ways, that's what we are. We're all storytellers. We experience life. And then we share it with other people. And we're doing it right now. Earlier in the thing, we were talking about the process of like becoming myself as a we, not as a me, in regards to getting engaged. And I said, I don't know if I'm finished with that process, but today I'm satisfied with it because my job is not to master. I'm not responsible for fully developing, although I need to continue to practice in order to develop, right? But my job is to shed light and to share my experiences with others and to be a teacher. And what am I teaching? I'm teaching myself. I'm teaching who I am to others and whatever I find along my journey. And that's something that's that's been like something that like stuck with me since I'm like 14 years old. Like listening to Terrapin Station for the first time on mushrooms, and I'm like listening to it and like taking in every word that he says, and the music that accompanies that song feels like a journey. It feels like a climb. And I knew in my heart of hearts that my job is to shed light. I might need to master a few things along the way in order to shed light, but the job is to shed light, not to master it. I don't do it for the sake of doing it so I could be done with it. I do it for the sake of doing it so that way I could share it with other people.
That's really interesting.
Which, for me, is the essence of the Grateful Dead, because primarily they sing stories. They're folk singers on that level. All their songs are stories, and they're just elucidating these feelings and experiences of humanity and giving you the safety to experience it. And Jerry himself died. He died in a detox that he helped build, that he helped pay for, right? He died in detox trying to get off of heroin. He himself didn't master much, but he shed light onto all these experiences.
And their songs are very much in the way of then sharing, not telling. They're kind of just inviting people into a story. Connected, but not entirely the same. When I heard those lyrics, I connected with that. Yeah, its job is to shed light, not to master. I have this ongoing conversation with Aryeh. You asked me something about that before, but we briefly touched on it in the podcast that I did with Aryeh. But he has this movie that he really likes, and he told me to watch it, and I watched it, and we talked about it quite a bit. It's an Amazon movie. It's called Life Itself, and in it, well, I'm not going to get into the movie, but there's this theme that we are our own worst narrators. We do a terrible job of narrating, but at the same time, that is a vital role that we play for others. We shed light for others, but we're often like really bad narrators when we're trusting our own narration too much. But it is vital to like notice, like shed light, so that when I encounter something, I can recognize and identify maybe what I'm feeling or experiencing, and maybe how far it goes back and where and what, but not to master, which is like two things. One, to acknowledge it just because the result was whatever it was last time I experienced this similar set of scenario or feelings. Like, that doesn't mean that it's the case this time. Like, so I'm not going to pretend that I have already mastered it. Like, has yet to be experienced because it's completely new and different, even though it's shares, the storytelling narrative style shares some similarity with my history. And oftentimes the best way I can make that distinction is when I'm shedding light for others.
Yeah.
I experienced that yesterday where I was really isolating and I was kind of wanting to stay there. And when I'm in that space, I generally don't respond to calls or texts. And then someone called me and I just had an instinct and I took the call. And the person was just sharing something that he was going through, and this very familiar thing happened where I said exactly what I needed to hear. Right. But I never would have said anything remotely close to that to myself unless it was sharing it with someone else about what he was going through. And it turned out to be exactly what that person needed to hear, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. But I was only able to find that when I was in the mode of shedding light, and that's like this spiritual gift that we're able to give each other when we're not trying to master.
Exactly. If I wait to master something before I shed light, I might not have anything to offer anybody ever, because the bad narrator to myself that I am will tell me consistently and constantly that this place that I'm in is not enough yet. And he does tell me that. You are not enough yet. Not yet. You still have more to do. And there's a truth to that.
Right.
But it doesn't invalidate what I've learned already. in the experience of being myself.
When your father told you about this need for an anchor,
Yeah.
he just did that and he didn't suggest or imply what he thought that should be? First of all, I want it like that's like a really nice gift to get from a dad. It's like a
I'll give you the back end of that story. I skipped the Hagdamas of that story, but I came home one night tripping on LSD to my parents' house, and they were sitting and eating dinner at the dining room table with my two little siblings, and I always used to walk around with Sharpies, markers, and I put out a white napkin and started doodling. I couldn't possibly eat. I was tripping so intensely, so beautifully. Couldn't possibly eat, but I felt like it was normal to sit at the dinner table with them. Not that I knew what normal meant, but in that moment, it felt like the normal thing to do is to sit at the dinner table, whatever. So I sat at the dinner table and I'm drawing on this napkin, and there was like a break in the conversation. So I felt like, oh, there's a break in the conversation. It's time for me to give my input because that's normal. And so I say something, and my dad turns to me and he says, I know you think you were speaking English, but to us it just sounded like. And I was like, what? And he's like, and I also know you think you're drawing on that white napkin, but you left the napkin like 15 minutes ago and you're drawing all over Ema's white tablecloth. And I like look down and I look down at what I'm drawing, and like, first of all, the colors are everywhere because I'm tripping. And so like the colors were like bleeding off the napkin, but also like the colors were everywhere because I was literally like just drawing lines across my mother's white tablecloth. He's like, I think you should go upstairs and I'll be up there in a few minutes. And so I go upstairs, and then he comes upstairs and he sits me down. And like I said, I'm a deadhead, the son of a deadhead. So he wasn't shocked that his son would be on LSD, and it wasn't the right time to like have like a harsh talking to. He didn't want to potentially ruin my trip because that could have like really negative, long-standing negative effects. So in the most patient voice he could say, he's like, listen, you're untethered. You're going to need an anchor. Life will untether you. You're going to need an anchor. And that was like his way of like, I want to say like giving me musser, but that was like giving me a talking to at that moment in time. Like, life is fucking hard, dude. And like right now, you're untethered. Like, you are not handling your shit. Get your shit together. You're going to need something to keep you grounded. Because if you don't have something to keep you grounded, you're just going to be swept the fuck away. And in the nice way of saying that, specifically because I was tripping, he said it in that way. That was like mellow and nice. And he wasn't trying to get me to like engage religion or anything like that. He just wanted to make sure that his son would not be untethered, because I was clearly so fucking out there.
Wow. There's so many parts to that story that are beautiful. You're a lucky guy. And that, I mean, I don't mean that not patronizing. I mean, like, you know, to have a dad that would be able to have the presence of mind to know, you know, the position that you're in and what might be effective, what might be counterproductive.
I'm truly blessed. I'm grateful for him most of the time.
So you said you're the son of a deadhead. There's a cool story that I heard you tell a little while ago about the undershirts.
Right.
Could you tell that story?
Yeah, it's a good story. So in probably 1977, my dad was on tour, and he was doing East Coast tour, and he was following the Dead around. And, you know, he was selling in the parking lot of Grateful Dead shows was it was like an open market, fully open market, similar to a shuk if you've been to Israel, of drugs, T-shirts, posters, all sorts of different things and whatever, people hawking their wares. And my dad, in order to get from concert to concert, was selling T-shirts. But he was not selling tie-dye T-shirts or Grateful Dead T-shirts. He was selling white Hanes T-shirts that he bought at Walmart or something similar. And he was holding them up, and he was saying, 3-sided electric T-shirts, 3-sided electric T-shirts, get your 3-sided electric T-shirt. And people would come over to him, and they'd be wide-eyed and tripping balls at a Dead show, and they'd be like, what are you selling, dude? And he would say, I'm selling 3-sided electric T-shirts. And they're like, what? And he would like turn the T-shirt one way and say side 1, turn it back the other way and say side 2, and then turn it back the other way again and say side 3. And they would look at him and be like, but what's electric about it? And he was like, you're what's electric about it. And people would buy the T-shirt, man, and he'd go to the next concert.
That's great.
Chaim, you're what's electric about Chaim.
Thanks. Yeah, but don't I mean, how often do I do that, right? So whatever it is that's in front of me, I assume that's what's electric. And my life is going to pot because I don't have that. And I always, as soon as I do that, I now there's no way I can do that thing, because if that's the thing that's keeping between me and being electric, then I got to stay in this place that's not electric and have a good reason why I'm staying here, because I can't do this thing and I'm supposed to do this thing and I can't, and I'm not. Right. So like it's a double whammy. One, this thing becomes, instead of like a little thing, it becomes this insurmountable large boulder, because it's the thing keeping between me and my electricity. And then two, there's like a false premise there that it's something else outside of me, right? Some untangible, that moving target also, because it's constantly changing. Once I do that, then it's something else. Right. And, right, but instead it's, and not in like a...
I just want to cut you off for a second. You have AirPods, correct?
Uh-huh.
I noticed your AirPods over the period of time that we've been spending together, and decided that I could be as electric as Chaim if I buy Samsung Buds.
Amusing. You identified that as a lack that you hinged on, right?
Exactly.
Right.
I could be as electric as you if I have Samsung Buds. Now, it wasn't only as electric as you; it was as electric as what having these Bluetooth headphones represented, which was productivity and moving and shaking, and I can accomplish more and I'll be more, and I'm going to be the next better version of myself if I just have this product. And all of that was wrapped up in watching you, which was, at the time when I put it on paper, you and I were, I would see you at work with your AirPods in, accomplishing the same exact task I was doing, holding the phone to my face. But yours looked much more electric than what I was doing, even though we were accomplishing the same thing.
Wait a second.
I wanted to share a short Mazel with you. It's been on my mind.
So there's when you said that, you reminded me of this story. It's a Chelm story, I think. Yeah, so it's a fellow from the town of Chelm. Right, I'm not going to explain whatever. Either you know what that means or not. But I should explain it, right? Okay.
Do your listeners know what Chelm is?
I don't know. I don't know who the listeners are. But all right, so it's a Chelamite story. I'm not going into that. So
Chelm is a town of morons.
Right, but they're really smart, and a lot of deep things can be gleaned from Chelamite stories. But it's
because of the simplicity of their nature.
Exactly. So the depth is in the simplicity is their depth, and vice versa. So he goes to visit this town, rich people, and in this big city, he notices a bunch of people running, and they're all running with buckets, and there's a fire, right? And they're all rushing with buckets, and they put out the fire. And he's like, "Oh my God, that's amazing." Okay, I'm gonna start the story again. He observed.
Skip the hakdamas. I have a sign on the front of my door by say it says skip the hakdamas.
That's what happens when you make hakdamas. You miss the point of the story. So he's in the town square, and he sees there's a house on fire, and then he hears sees this guy go to this pole, and he rings this bell, and then all of a sudden people start running from all parts of the square with buckets of water, and they rush to the source of the fire and put it out. And instead of the fire spreading to all the little houses attached to it, and like as can happen in a shtetl, they put out the fire successfully. And so like he's like, "Oh my God, that's amazing." And he goes back to Chalm, and he says, "We've been living here like idiots for decades, and every time there's a fire, it takes out like the whole area till we have a chance to put it out." He says that in the big town they have this cool invention, and I want to make it happen here. And so they collect money, and they get all the town dignitaries together, and they put it to a vote, and they decide absolutely we should do that. And they put in this bell, and they're just waiting for a fire. And then finally the fire comes, and he's like, "Everyone stay calm, I got this." And then he, as the representative, goes and give this grand gesture and rings the bell, and obviously nothing happens, and then the house burns down, and the house next to it burns down. And then he gets like extremely upset, and everyone comes running to him complaining, and then he goes back to the big town, and he goes to the mayor, and he says, "How dare you? You guys lied to me, and you have this bell here, and it's setting a bad example, and I tried it, and it's a big fake, and you're a phony." Asks him what happened. He tells him, and then he goes, "Well, it's not the bell that puts out the fire. The bell, makes people aware of the fact that there's a fire. Then they go up, put out the fire." How did we get here?
I don't know how we got here, but that reminds me of a story.
Wait.
Oh, I'm waiting.
I gotta backtrack here. You're what's electric about the T-shirt, and the AirPods, right? So we right. So that's the connection. So we latch on to these things that are representative of something, completely forgetting that it isn't those things, right? It's not the bell. It's the people who care enough about putting out the fire, and they're ready to put aside whatever they're doing to fill up their buckets with water, and then go over in a systematic fashion, and then put out the fire at the source. Right? So that we just kind of looking around, and we just see these bells everywhere.
Right.
And it just feels really good to assume that it's these like bells that are doing it.
Just to bring it back to the dead for a second, you had an opportunity to shed light on your efficiency if I had only asked you about it. But instead, I looked at the mastering of your efficiency of the AirPods and tried to mimic that. But if I'd gone over to, and you're probably still on a journey of becoming more and more efficient and productive, and that's just one piece of it for you. But I looked at that as the mastering, right? And if I had looked at it as an opportunity for you to shed light, I would have been like, Chaim, I think that you're more efficient because of your AirPods. What's the story here?
Mm.
You could have shared with me the years of caring and wanting to be more efficient and being more productive with your time.
Right.
And you would have maybe suggested, no. Like, you don't start with getting your own Samsung buds. There's like years of prep work that go into receiving that.
Right.
Because they're just things.
Right.
So there's an opportunity there related directly back to that, like that one song and that one thing, right? But what's interesting is that the Helm story brought up something else for me, which goes back to what we started the podcast with, which was like the self-parenting. So a few weeks ago, I went to my in-laws for Shabbat.
I love how you're calling them your in-laws already.
Yeah.
She's your wife, and if I didn't know any better, you were like years into this thing.
Right. So I was at my future in-laws for Shabbat, and I may have told you the story, but it's worth mentioning through the lens of the Helm situation. And on Shabbos day, you know, I'd scheduled to get coffee with some friends before shul as a way of like getting grounded, because oftentimes I find those environments shul, and they were throwing me a kiddush, throwing Yocheved and I kiddush. I find those situations quite overwhelming. So I figured, you know, let me get coffee with my friends before shul, and we'll sit, we'll schmooze, we'll have spiritual dialogue, we'll fabring a little bit, and then I'll go to shul and it'll be good. So Yocheved asked me that after I finish with that fabring, I should go pick her up, and then we'll go to shul together. No problem. I walk into shul, and this guy comes rushing towards me. He's like, your father-in-law wanted you to have an aliyah. The whole shul is waiting for you. The whole shul is waiting for you. I walk into shul, and a 1,000 eyes of Jewish guilt and shame were upon me from externally. And the entire weight of disappointment that I carry with me in my life was weighing on me. In that moment, I was exactly 1 inch tall. You know what I mean? And I saunter over to my future father-in-law, and I shake his hand and I say good Shabbos. And they already finished with the Torah and they put it away and they're about to start Musaf. And my father is next to my father-in-law, and he scooches over a seat so I could sit between the two of them. So here I am sitting next to one person who I just disappointed. And I'm sitting next to another person who literally created all of my trigger buttons in my life, right? My father, who instilled all of my feelings of, you know, he knows exactly what buttons to push because he installed them, right? So the person that I could be the most ashamed in front of, my father. So I'm between these two giant pillars of shame, so to speak. And I sit there in that moment, and I knew that there was no way I was going to be effective the rest of the day if I couldn't get grounded in the here and now. I was just fucked fully, because if I carried this any longer, there's nothing. I'm finished. I'm done. There's no way. And I sit down in the seat and I close my eyes and I began to parent myself. And I said, it's okay, buddy. Nobody told you. Nobody told you that they wanted to give you an aliyah. Your father-in-law never said anything. He never came over to you. The guy in Chelm never told anybody that they have to get the buckets when the bell's ringing. Right? He never told them. He didn't even recognize that that was part of the process. Right? And in that way, it was all lifted. There was no... I didn't meet an expectation. I didn't know I was supposed to meet that expectation.
Right.
And he just assumed, I'll just put up the bell and ring it.
Right.
And he'll go up for the aliyah. He didn't tell me that I need to carry the buckets. And if we just communicated better, if the guy in Chelm communicated better, right? If I had communicated better with you about the AirPods, right? How much better would we be? How much better off would we be, right? You started this whole thing by saying that, like, if you take 2 minutes to get to know somebody, you find you like it.
I asked you if you'd want to do a podcast about comics and superheroes because I know nothing about it and I'd like to learn about it. Tell me about superheroes and tell me about comics in like 2 minutes or less. But particularly, I asked you to tell me about one or two that were particularly meaningful or are particularly meaningful for you.
So, one of the ones I decided to go with, and because you want 1 or 2 minutes, maybe we'll just focus on this one. I decided to talk about the Hulk, who
Could
is...
you, before you lose 2 minutes, but before you talk about the Hulk, just tell me a little bit about like superheroes in general, maybe like a first exposure and like how that came about, that is a large part of your life. Or is it? I don't know. It seems like it is.
So, my first memory of being aware of superheroes was sitting in my grandparents' house and watching these 1920s, 1930s, maybe not, maybe they were later. I don't know. They were definitely black and white Superman and Shazam movies that my grandfather had, that he had watched as a teenager, and he had them on film and tape cassettes. We used to watch them, and on my grandparents' on TV. I don't think we had a TV with channels in the house at the time. I was 4, and they had these animated...
Skip the Hakdamas. I have a sign on the front of my door by say it says skip the Hakdamas.
In 1996, they created an animated series of the X-Men and Hulk. And I used to sit and watch that television show. And that was my first awareness, really, of superheroes and the world of superheroes. Interestingly enough, I was sexually abused as a child. And I was very aware of the pain of my existence, which I'd mentioned earlier, and ultimately I'd blocked out those memories, and I actually didn't remember them till much later in my life. Should I have said trigger warning? And I'm not going to get into the details of that, but I blocked it out, but I was living with the pain, and so I couldn't remember it, but I knew that my life was painful, and all of these superheroes had tremendous amounts of pain. These were people with troubled backgrounds and traumas. And some of the traumas that some of these superheroes lived with, much greater than anything I've experienced. Like real traumas. And yet they were superheroes. And I was fascinated.
So these superheroes, nearly all or all have backstories?
Nearly all of them have traumatic backstories. It's like almost like a joke in like the comic books community that like the only way to be a superhero is to kill your parents or have your parents be killed, or like someone needs to be raped that you love, or like you need to watch someone get murdered, or like whatever, like you need to have almost drowned, or like you need to be an abusive alcoholic, or like there's no way to be a superhero. It's like a joke almost. There's no way to be a superhero if you don't have that stuff.
And so when you were a kid and watching that episode like that, you remember being aware of that notion that there was supposed to be, or almost had to be, something to precede becoming a hero?
Well, I was 4.
Oh, wow.
I was 4, and I'm watching this stuff on the TV screen, and I identified with it, and I didn't know why I identified with it. In fact, my awareness of why I identified with it has only made sense in retrospect. Oftentimes we're children and we don't know why we cleave to something. We just cleave to it and we ascribe the meaning to why we cleave to it later. But I cleaved to it, man. It was like my saving grace. Like this was the lens that I was going to view life through. And I didn't know that was a decision I was making. I didn't know it was happening. It just became my existence.
And I asked you to choose one. You chose the Hulk.
Yes.
What's the Hulk? I know he's a big green guy. That's all I know.
So the Hulk is a big green guy. That's correct. The Hulk is a alter ego of someone named Bruce Banner. Just to touch on Bruce Banner's backstory a little bit, he is a scientist, and in the comic book world, he is one of the 8 smartest people on the planet. And might be one of the smartest men in the universe. As the comic book world expanded, he's still been to countless planets, and he's still like one of the smartest people that ever existed, genius level. And his father hated him growing up. His father resented having a boy, hated him, and therefore hated his mother for having him, was physically and verbally abusive, and then killed his mother in front of him when he was a young boy. And then his father went to a psych ward where he lived out the rest of his days for the most part. There are times when he gets out of prison, different things, whatever, but for the most part, he's living in a psych ward. And Bruce Banner went to go live with his aunt and cousin as a young child, and then went on to become a great scientist. And one day, Bruce Banner was running a test in Nevada and at a government base, a secret base, and they were testing this gamma radiation bomb, and he noticed that some young child had somehow gotten out into the desert right near where the gamma bomb was going to go off, and Bruce Banner runs out there to save this kid. The bomb goes off, and somehow he absorbed all of that gamma energy, and when he gets too angry, he becomes the Hulk. That is the short of it.
So that's how he becomes this
Big green hulking monster.
Well, I'm curious about a lot of things, but this backstory about the father and the mother, and is that told to children in the comic books, like that are geared for kids? Did they learn that as part of? Or is that something that's later in like the adult?
For the most part, comic books are not geared towards children. They're geared towards like teenagers and adults. For the most part, at least when they were initially written.
Right.
They were not initially written for, at least these stories were not written for young children, 5, 6 years old. They were written for teenagers. People.
And when the teenagers learn about them through the comic books, they're learning about that backstory too. It comes or in slow doses, I imagine, throughout as they get to know them.
One of the great things that comic books do at times is they reveal the backstory slowly,
right,
which gives credence to the pain as the character develops, which gives credence to our pain as we uncover it slowly in our own life.
Mm-hmm. And I think maybe the only one I watched is Spider-Man when I was younger, but if I remember correctly, there's this thing that happens where right as they're up against, which is just an arc in storytelling, you see it in movies in general, right? It's particularly when they're up against a new large hurdle that they recall something from their past, which on the face of it is something that can really victimize anyone, but that they draw strength for this new frontier. It's like right when they're like doubting their strength that they remember something.
You know, we spoke about this a couple weeks ago. I had mentioned to you that by the time I was 10 years old, I had thousands of heroes' journeys in my head from reading comic books and these fantasy stories and stuff like that. Thousands. You know, just tons of story arcs where the hero doesn't want to do the heroic thing, and then he's called to do it, and then he wants to quit, and he just wants to go back to living in his isolation, and then a new threat emerges, and the exact reason why he wants to live in isolation is the exact reason why he has to go and face this new horrendous thing, and then he overcomes, and he's a hero. Yeah, that's like, and that plays out, in tons of literature. This form of literature has made it accessible on some level through the inaccessibility. And one of the reasons why I chose the Hulk specifically is because I identified with the Hulk's trauma and the Hulk's journey into becoming a hero. The Hulk that most people associate with, the big green guy, is a manifestation of anger for Bruce Banner. All of his anger compelled into one green hulking monster, and he's able to channel that anger to do heroic things. And when I was a child, I could remember living with resentment and anger, wishing I could turn into a Hulk and do something heroic with my anger, that I could utilize it for good. And as I've developed spiritually, I have. As I live in this world and I let go of my anger, I find that the things that I was angry about is the gift to help somebody else, oftentimes, like the gifts of room, which we had mentioned, right? See, really, we were talking about this the whole time. There are different iterations of the Hulk that are expressions of different traumas that Bruce Banner lived with. And they all live inside of him. And on some level, the Hulk is, I'm studying social work at school, and I'm studying this stuff. And on some level, the Hulk is, and all the different iterations of the Hulk that live inside of Bruce Banner are different ways that trauma plays out in our life. And how Bruce Banner navigates that stuff and then does fucking heroic things. But the most heroic thing that Bruce Banner does is continuously show up as Bruce Banner, despite the fact that he's tired and he doesn't want to Hulk out and he just wants to be alone and he doesn't want to live with his pain. He suits up and shows up because that's his power. His pain is his power.
I asked you to isolate one little clip that we can use. So I wonder if I could play that. Tell me what.
Dr. Banner, now might be a really good time for you to get angry.
That's my secret, Captain. I'm always angry.
Hold on.
So what we just heard is at the end, towards the end of the first Avengers movie, Bruce Banner has not wanted to Hulk out throughout like the whole movie, and aliens invade Earth, and he doesn't want to Hulk out because he's satisfied as living as Bruce Banner. Like he's finally come to grips with like, I don't want to be the monster anymore. Like I want to find a way to be useful without having to engage my anger, right? Which is a very powerful thing. He wants to just be useful as Bruce Banner. But then, no, you can't ignore this part of you. And you have to use the angry part of you also. Like you're going to, like, now's a good time to get angry. And then Bruce Banner's like, that's the secret. I'm always angry. And then he turns into the Hulk, and we heard him taking down this giant Empire State Building sized alien.
So the thing that might be associated as the obstacle ends up being the source of our strength.
Exactly. 100%. And I might be an idiot, and that's why, I hear you sometimes using Hasidic language to describe the same things that I find in these seemingly childish sources, right? But I needed it spoon-fed to me, man. Like I needed someone to say, you too could be a hero in this way. Like, you too, like, can use this dark part of you. Every part of you is useful. And like, maybe I could have found that if I was more diligent in my studies in school. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe I could have found that if I invested a lot of time into exploring the depths that our religion has to offer. But there was a man named Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, and they wrote a story about a human who had pain and had to learn that the source of his strength came from his pain. And not that he had to continue to live in his trauma, but like he needs to find a way to like utilize his pain as a gift to humanity. And like, I just learned that, dude. Like, I just fucking learned that from reading comic books. But it wasn't like an acute awareness I had when I was like 14 years old and I'm reading a comic, or when I was 4 years old and I first discovered it.
Right.
I had a moment a few years ago. When I was in high school, I used to read these books called the Percy Jackson stories. It's a series of books. They're still putting out new books today. It's a very long, drawn-out series. It's about, like, what if, like, the Greek gods were still having children, demigod children today in the modern world? And what would that be like? And I used to read them. And then they made a movie about one of them. And I'm sitting and I'm watching this movie, and it's, frankly, at the time that I was watching it, I was like, this is pretty stupid. Like, this is clearly made for children, and I don't identify with this. What did I ever pull out of this in high school? Like, why did I read this? And one of the things that I discovered was that I was waiting for someone to tell me that I was a child of God. The same way the main character in the story discovers that he's a demigod. That's why I loved those books. Because deep down inside, I was just waiting to discover that I'm a child of God in a way that was meaningful. Not because someone told me that I'm the chosen nation, or like God loves me individually, or that I'm his son and that he loves me. None of that. But for me to really discover it within myself. That's why I love this stuff.
That's something that we become aware of later on. It's not really something that we appreciate at the time.
No.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I certainly have examples of that myself. Not with comics, with other things that I can realize now that I gravitated to. This has been like really beautiful way to get to know you. And
thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Reminded me why I wanted to do this and am doing it despite my resistances. And actually, I don't know what you're doing after, but I'm gonna Hulk out over here and jump into the part 2 of the thing that I was avoiding for already a month now.
Amazing.
Except unlike anger, it's the fact that I'm always ashamed that is my strength.
Yo, don't get me started on that. Did I tell you what I was doing the other night about Adam Arishon?
No. I mean, I guess this thing's already rated for the language, so you might as well tell me that story. Because it sounds like highly sexual in nature, just from the sound of it.
It's definitely not.
Oh.
But it's about shame.
When anyone says shame, I just assume it's sexual.
So there's like a general rule that, like, how do we know what a word means in the Torah, right? We look at the adjective that's used around the word the first 3 times, and that's how we figure out what it means. And the essence of what that thing is what's used around it the first time it's brought up. It's just a general rule. The first 2 times in the Torah that it says ish, the words around it is embarrassed. Yitboshesh, I believe. And the first time it says it, Adam Arishon was naked and not embarrassed. And the second time, he was naked and he was embarrassed.
Mm.
And what happened between those two times was the chet of Eitz Hadas, right? What I discovered while thinking about this and talking about this with my younger brother's friend Avichai was the Eitz Hadas literally means, the tree of knowledge. And Adam Rishon developed the knowledge that he was naked. Now, he was naked before, so what? He wasn't aware of the fact that he was naked before? No, he was aware of the fact that his nakedness, that his physical sense was a separation from God, or so he believed in that moment. And so he was embarrassed, and he experienced shame. And that the essence of man is the ability to experience shame, to experience the conscious separation of God, and how small we feel when we have that. And that's our secret. We're always ashamed, right? And if I could use my shame as a springboard to be the only reason I'm ashamed right now is because I currently believe that I'm disconnected from God.
Or, right? Yeah, finish.
And understand that that's a delusion. That it's possible to be naked and still be connected to God. Then no matter what I'm experiencing shame about, in that moment, I could be connected to God. The shame disappears. The shame disappears. For me, I've experienced it. And sometimes like when I graduated and I felt shame, right? And I was walking down, and why was I ashamed? Because everyone's here congratulating me, and I don't feel like I deserve any congratulations. But if I stopped in that moment and said, really, this is an expression of my higher power loving me, I don't think I would have felt so ashamed.
Right. So we can almost say that to be human, to be a man, is to experience shame, but that can either be the source of a man's destruction or its greatest potential. In that,
that's my secret.
Right, that's my secret. Because in unhealthy shame, right, it's stifling, and I'm stuck, right, because I'm less than human, and at the same time more than human, right? I'm experiencing my conscious separation as reality. And when I'm in that space, the only remedy I can give myself is to believe that I am God. So I vacillate between this state of more and less than human at the same time. And on the same token, that to be a man is to experience shame in the healthy sense, which is the conscious awareness that I'm not God. Not that I'm consciously separated, but the conscious appreciation of the fact that I'm not God. Neither am I supposed to be. So that this thing that I was laboring over and feeling shame around, probably because I wasn't appreciating that I was not supposed to be God around that thing.
Right.
And I was supposed to be, and I can be, appreciating my finite
connection with God.
Right. So that I can be
productive.
Yeah.
Useful.
And right. And then those I kind of just go together harmoniously. One, that I'm not God, and two, at the same time I can be consciously, and I am at my core, a part of.
Mamish.
You're sitting here, yeah, mamish, all right, as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya. Speaking of Tanya, yeah, this is going beyond the time that we allotted, but it's good. You know, the room is dark, the smoking room. Maybe I'll take a picture so we can, I don't know if it's going to come through on the picture, but Shmaya put these pillows to cover the sun coming through the windows here, because it's pretty bright. It's a sunny day in August in New York City, and we're in the smoking room, and we don't have the vent on or whatever. Hagdamas. But you put these pillows in front of the window, but there's still like a little bit of sunlight coming through the top, and I could kind of see it now. Before it was stronger, there's a ray of sunlight cracking through the top of that window right onto you. And there's a mashal that the Alter Rebbe gives in the beginning of Shar Yocheved Turner that we've been talking about and learning together, which is exactly this, right? So man is both nothing on the one hand and everything, because we could be consciously a part of. So that the example is given that it's like the ray of the sunlight. The ray is nothing, right? It's only just a reflection of its source. And I can hear that in the way of I'm nothing, or I can hear that as like, oh my God, like the infinite amount of possibility, because I'm nothing but an everything that is a ray of God's light in the world. That's like that meditation on its own could be enough to like, yeah.
It's sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Shmaya.
אז אל תחשוב יותר מדי אם זה כדאי או לא כדאי, אתה יודע אם לא עכשיו אז מתי, ואל תחשוב כל כך הרבה כמה זה קשה או לא יוצא או לא שווה, לא תדע אם לא תנסה, כי הגיע הזמן הגאולה, הגיע הזמן הגאולה, אני שומע ינון ואליה, ואם יבוא אחד יאמר שמאוחר או מיותר או אי אפשר, תדע לך, השער עוד לא נסגר. אז בוא נצא לרחוב, נשב בחוץ נשיר קצת, יהיה טוב. כל מי שנראה, נזמין אותו לשבת איתנו ותראה איך כל הרחוב תכף מתמלא, מלא באנשים שעוברים ועוצרים, איתנו הם שרים שהגיע הזמן הגאולה, הגיע הזמן הגאולה, אני שומע ינון ואליה, הגיע הזמן הגאולה, הגיע הזמן גאולתכם, אני שולח ינון